guys for coming. This is so cool. Yeah. And so I'll just say one more thing, which is we brought them, and then I made Roger Hull stagger up here midweek to look at it, because in the photo, I really felt two things should be changed. And I was thinking, oh, they're gonna just go ballistic but they said, no, that's fine. Oh, they were two things the same size. But I did have my personal curator here to give the seal. And it isn't everyone who has a personal curator.
Yeah.
I'm very beholden to Salem Art and appreciate the chance to see all the work up, and appreciate you all coming to look at it. Hello, I'm Bonnie Hull. This is my solo show at the A.M. Bush Gallery at Salem Art Association. The exhibit is called Marking Time, and involves much of the mark making that I do in various areas. On this wall is the paintings conceived all together as a composition with this painted backdrop as the background. I started using painted backdrops about 4 years ago, and in my last few shows have used that. So here again, painted backdrop, and then different elements placed around on the backdrop and background. And the genesis of this wall came from this particular painting, and I took this image, blew it all up, made a template, used that to paint the backdrop, and then used it again in the paintings. 3 templates for the 3 different images here. And these paintings are all from this year, with the exception of the one. So I like very much the notion of having composition and being able to change the elements around as I go. Additionally, in the gallery are quilts and drawings, and a lot of my thinking of the last few years involves, COVID for one. I did 90 drawings during COVID, and there are 20 framed drawings here in the gallery for this exhibit from that series. And then there's a 19-foot drawing, some quilts, and a few smaller paintings. So maybe we'll cruise around and take a look at what there is. This is the second in the COVID drawings that I did a series of 90 during the lockdown. I was artist in residence here at the Salem Art Association when the lockdown occurred, and I had a drawing going. And this was then the second, or really the first one I did at home. And this figure of the girl with the brain is kind of my personal avatar and is seen throughout this exhibit in various situations. And in this case, many of the things that she's thinking about wind up being pictured throughout the work in the show. So it's a good one to start with. In this drawing, I imagined a piece that I would make, which would involve quilting 2 pieces of fabric, sewing them together with a piece in between to form the head. The top would be open, and I would fabricate a brain that would fit down inside the 3-dimensional piece. I did quilt the fabric. I began to work on it and quickly realized that my sewing skills were not up to the challenge of making the centerpiece and having her face look like anything. So I made, these two pieces were the pieces that I made, and they wound up being freestanding pieces. So the fabric is hand quilted, and this girl has a brain, and this girl just has a lot of hair. And this is a conversation, and this is what they're talking about, these two ladies. This one was later in the series, but I think is on the same wavelength, and it's my avatar, the brain girl, as I call her. And what's in her brain is drawing, 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 and drawing, which is something I do a lot of. Additionally, I'm a quilter besides making 2D work, and these are 3 quilts that I've made over the course of the last 4 years. In this particular one, all of these are what you might call scrap quilts, where I've used a variety of pieces given to me sometimes by others. In this case, I used a whole variety, and these pieces, which show a slightly yellow, are pieces of my wedding dress, which has a seam in it. And my mom made my wedding dress, so her hand is here with my hand. The black quilt was made, the white quilt was second, the black quilt was first. And this quilt in between was made just this year for this exhibit, moving in an ombre effect from black to white. And it has a little piece of the wedding dress in it too. All this fabric was given to me by friends and other quilters. And this is a Kawandi quilt, so pieced around this way as you go, sewn together. During COVID, as I was working on these some 90 drawings, I began to use the red dot as kind of the representative of the virus itself. And so it plays out through many of these drawings. This one, which is number 58, is called Message to Self. And the message is COVID. This one is called Fall Bouquet. It was number 73 in the series. And I had a bouquet from my garden, and a gardener as well as a quilter and a painter. And again, COVID was in full strength at that point, so hence the red circles. And the second one is called the Spaliate virus, and involves a big COVID dot with an espaliate apple all around the edge. Number 10th in the series, is the one on the right, called Floating Bits of Code. And I see the COVID representation. I'm not too sure what else I had going on there in mind. But it doesn't matter now. And this one is the result of pruning Emily. Emily is a hydrangea I planted when my friend's daughter graduated from high school. She's in her mid-40s now, and the plant is quite large. So I pruned it and put it in a vase, but very tiny at the bottom is the red dot. We can't get away from COVID. The middle one, called Stove Eye. Stove Eye is a quilt pattern, and this has a quote on it from Mary Atkins, who was a Black American quilter. And it says, "There was no playing after work, but I'd sit down on a stool and begin piecing." And she's describing her childhood education in quilt making. And the last one in this set is called "Virus Thoughts Endure," which kind of references, again, the fact that we could not and cannot get away from the virus itself and the thoughts about what it has happened. This series of 3 drawings was made in response to my trying to imagine what a number of deaths looked like in terms of real marks. When this one, the one on the right, was made, there were 100,000 people had died from COVID. So I gridded a piece of notebook paper, and then I gridded the drawing paper, and then I began making marks. And when I had filled one square, I wrote down, I counted every mark, I wrote down the number, and so on throughout the page. And then when I was down, I counted them all, and in this case, it is 16,600 marks of the nearly 100,000 people who had died from COVID at that point. This middle one, by now the count was up to 400,000. And again, same technique. My marks, as you can tell by color, were much closer together and much smaller. And this particular piece wound up being 16,400 marks of the nearly 400,000 people who had lost their lives at that point. And in this case, I gridded the paper with tape and to make my squares, and you can see the red dot is floating around in there. And this was 20,000 of the 160,000 who had died at the point that I made this particular drawing. These 4 are also part of the COVID series. Again, plant references abound. The one on the upper left, called Court Street, was based on a design that I had in mind possibly for a quilt, and then it became something else. And the mysterious kind of erased figure underneath the word street is actually the Gold Pioneer atop the State Capitol building, which is in my neighborhood. So, and again, it just references my neighborhood and being alive and COVID and all that meant to us at a certain point. The upper right and the lower left are basically plant-based images, again using the red to stand in for the COVID. The bottom right, I was trying to draw a sketch map of my house, the exterior of my house, and found from my brain, thinking about it while sitting in my dining room, I couldn't draw a sketch map of my house. I kept missing the porch or something. So I then just began drawing things in the house that I could see and superimpose them on top. This is Corona drawing number 5, drawn before I had begun using the red dot in everything, and was very close to the time that I had been the artist in residence. And I had a lot of images of the different oak trees, which I think is where this tree image came from. And the bee box came from a piece that I bought in Ballard up in Seattle some years ago from a terrific guy who had a shop there with very individual, beautiful things in it. And I have that at home. And on this green fabric, there's a beautiful little coral pin inside the bee box. This is a 19-foot-long drawing called In the Shadow of the House. I drew the drawing in sections on my dining room table and had never seen the drawing on the wall until we delivered it here to Salem Art Association. The drawing there's a parentheses in this drawing, one side and the other anchored by the orchids. And then my husband Roger Hull appears 3 times in each of the sections of the drawing. And in this, there is actually the literal shadow of the house with his face coming up out of the shadow. Keeping with the plant motif, in the center, I used a piece made by the artist Dave Nichols. He and his wife Sandra practiced as Nick and Sloy, and this is a piece Dave made. Cardboard flowers and stems in a corrugated vase, and the images are made out of the paper covers of old paperbacks. We own that piece, so that was the second. The middle section is Roger bringing water to the table at a local coffee place, and a somewhat nebbishy person working on their laptop and thinking about all manner of things that a 30-year-old might think about. Existential crisis, whether you take a shower today or tomorrow, Netflix, Guatemala, and so on. And then rosemary is the plant that is in between section 2 and 3. Rosemary standing for remembrance. And then the final section is Roger on his bike gazing out at Silet's Bay, a place where we ride our bikes to frequently when we're at the beach. And then the final orchid. And that forms the ensemble of In the Shadow of the House. This is Corona number 59. By this point in the Corona series, I was in my house, as were we all, locked in with the same stuff around me and no real new ideas coming in. And I got a postcard, and it had these similar to these stripes on it. So I seized on it immediately and made this little gouache painting of the stripes. The title of this piece is Mahonia aquifolium, and that refers to our state plant, which is the Oregon grape, pictured on the right-hand side of the painting. The meadowlark is our state bird, and the shape above comes from our state flag. And then, of course, there's my avatar of the Brain Girl. And I don't think she's thinking about too much. We've just got ... in her her little balloon out of her head, but anyway, so this is an Oregon girl thinking about Oregon thoughts. Okay, the larger painting in the center is from several years ago. It's called Me Too, and it references the Me Too movement and the fact that any woman of my age, or really most any age, has had an experience that they could reference. Throughout my work, I use pattern, and especially floral pattern throughout. And in this piece, it's 3 separate panels that are screwed together, and with the different patterns and the florals in them. And the bunny that's hanging from the branch is kind of my symbol for innocence, and it reoccurs in my work and some of the other things too. And these 3 pieces on either side are things that are ideas and references from our grandson, Sydney, who makes lots and lots of drawings, gives me lots of good ideas. The 2 on the left were from a long series of rocket ship and so on drawings that he made, and then the one on the right was partly stolen from a dragon drawing that he made, except that there's a little balloon with a brain in it near each figure, and you know where that comes from. That is me all the way. So again, patterning and red and white I like a lot, and my avatar